And now, the Lowe Post.
Welcome to the Lowe Post podcast, where it's time to continue no one's favorite podcast gimmick of 2020. So, where the hell were we? And today we will focus on the 8th seed race in the Western Conference, starting with the Memphis Grizzlies and the New Orleans Pelicans, the highly anticipated New Orleans Pelicans. I am thrilled to welcome in for the discussion the one and only, the newest Twitter sensation on Twitter.com, which is otherwise a hellscape, Mr. Stan Van Gundy. How are you?
I'm good, Zach. I'm good.
Just making waves on Twitter. Not getting the blue check. You don't want the blue check. You want the street cred.
No, actually, so Twitter is shut down right now, and we're getting so close to the election that right now the only people they're verifying are political candidates, campaign managers, things like that. And so Turner is actually trying for me, and I've got a local campaign manager here who's trying, but no luck so far.
Oh my God! There's a full-scale organizational effort to get you verified, and it can't
there
work.
Is. And of course, I had no idea even what that was. I had no idea when people said, "Hey, do you want to get verified?" I'm like, I pretty much know who I am, so I don't know what you're talking about. But you know, we'll see.
You got it. Eventually, once the intro period is over, your avatar is currently you holding a sign that basically says, "I am. This is me." You got to change it to the famous photo from the bike ride in Detroit, where you look like you should be on the cover of a rap album. That's good.
Yeah.
That should be the avatar.
You know, it's so funny because they took that picture, and then I think Drummond originally posted it, and yeah, that's become a very famous thing. So
you've had some. We've talked about them on previous podcasts. Between Form a Wall and everything that happened in Orlando, you've been a part of some iconic
I'll tell
moments.
You, now, the best thing so far to happen to me on Twitter was Andrew Yang tweeted back at me, and what he tweeted back was "Form a wall," and I was like, "That's been my biggest moment on Twitter." So. Andrew Yang, the iconic Andrew Yang, and he's tweeting back at me. It was pretty good.
He's a big NBA fan, and that's only your biggest moment on Twitter because Twitter was still in its infancy during what has been affectionately called the Dwightmare. It was just still in its infancy back then. I love talking basketball with you. I'm so excited to do this. I've put these ones toward the end because there's actually something at stake for these teams. Everyone is super excited about the Pelicans. We'll get to them. Zion just left the bubble. Best wishes to his family. I don't exactly know what he's attending to. But the Memphis Grizzlies have earned our respect and our discussion in the pole position. They are 32-33, 20th in offense, 15th in defense, -1 scoring margin. They entered the bubble with a 3.5 game lead in the standings, and there was much consternation from Grizzly HQ about the fact that despite having a lead that in the past has been insurmountable, historically insurmountable with 18 games left, they are not guaranteed a playoff spot. But I actually think the league has really done a nice job setting Memphis up for giving them as big an advantage as they deserve. Because had the season played out, New Orleans had a real chance to catch them, among other teams. New Orleans' schedule was just angel food cake. Memphis' schedule was just a hellscape, and they had injuries. And if you look at the Grizzlies' schedule, if they go 3-5, if that's all they get, 3-5, these other teams have to go 7-1 to pass them or to catch them. Even if they go 2-6, which is like if you can't get better than 2-6, and I know your schedule's tough, these teams have to do an enormous amount of work. Like to even 5-3 doesn't get it done for the Pelicans and Blazers in that scenario. So I think the league has done the Grizzlies fairly. We can go any number of places with Memphis, but Coach, what interests you about their very surprising season, and what are you interested to watch once they start playing again as they kind of reintegrate some injured pieces and maybe integrate one big new piece?
Yeah, look, I think that their improvement is what really struck me. And I'll say the same thing when we get to New Orleans, but Memphis started 6-16, which I I don't think was anywhere near an underachievement, any of us watching. I mean, that's sort of what you expected. Young team, new head coach, supposed to be the rebuilding year. And then all of a sudden they start to win. They go 500 for, close to a month there. And then they go 15-4 in one stretch. And so they've been 26-17 since that disastrous start of a season. And that's more than half of a regular season. We've seen very, very good play. And Taylor Jenkins has sort of brought the Milwaukee formula in large part over, particularly at the defensive end. So there were, in that 43-game stretch, they were 8th in the league defensively. And how did they do it? They did it by protecting the paint. It's been the Milwaukee way, and it's been the Memphis way. And so Memphis, just like Milwaukee, gives up a lot of threes. Teams not only make a lot against Milwaukee, they shoot them at a high percentage. But they shut down the paint so well that they're able to be good defensively. And then at the other end of the floor offensively, behind Ja Morant, they run. They're a team that is in the top 5 in the league in fast break points, and they're the number 1 team in the league in points in the paint. They attack relentlessly. So this formula has worked well for them. The part of the Milwaukee formula they don't have, Zach, is they can't shoot. Yeah. They don't shoot it often from 3 or nearly as often. They don't make a lot of threes. They've really only got 2 guys who are going to make a lot of threes at a decent percentage, Jaren Jackson and Dylan Brooks. But they've done about as well as they can do with a young team that doesn't shoot the ball well. And I love the way they play. I mean, me as a fan, there are a handful of guys that, I'll turn on a game to watch, even for a few minutes, and Ja Morant's already one of those guys. I mean, and I think that if you're an NBA fan, Memphis as an 8 seed might not really excite you in this restart, but watching Ja Morant certainly should.
Well, if they're healthy, and when the season stopped, Jaren Jackson was injured and Brandon Clark was injured. Those are 2 really exciting young big men. Brandon Clark, I think they may go 1-2 in Rookie of the Year, depending on what people do with Zion on their ballot. They're really exciting to watch. And Ja Morant, look, we all know he is absolutely electrifying, to your point. Electrifying. No look passes, trying to dunk on people, super fast. And just remember really early in the season, it was like their 3rd game. Seems like 9 years ago. He blocked Kyrie Irving at the buzzer and just trash-talked Kyrie, got in everyone's face, and then they went on to win in overtime. And it just had this air of I'm f***ing ready. I'm not afraid of anybody. I am in this league. And so all that's awesome. But I think he's a really sophisticated basketball player already. He makes reads. He makes those reads where you can tell he's thinking a half second faster than most players on the court. One of my favorite things about him, frankly, and this is a very nerdy thing to say, is he's a really good cutter, and he's remains useful off the ball, because I think he realizes my speed is a weapon this way too. And you don't see you can attest to this. Most young point guards, most rookie point guards are bad because the league is just overwhelming for them. Even guys who are going on to be good, really good players, they just can't figure out the NBA. For this guy to come in and average 17-7, shoot it well, take decent care of the ball, and show some of that craft that I just talked about, I mean, that is remarkable.
Well, there's no question. And look, I think his assist totals are deceiving because, again, he's playing with a lot of guys who don't shoot the ball very well. So, number one, he doesn't get the space on the floor that he will get as they add more shooting. And number 2, as defenses collapse and he kicks the ball out, he's got guys who aren't knocking down shots on a regular basis. I think as the team around him improves, those other young guys get better, what we're going to notice about him above everything else is his passing. I think the guy sees the floor incredibly well. I think he is, as you say, a very mature decision maker for a young guy.
It's a great way to put it.
And so I think everything is there. And there are certain guys that both their ability and their presence on the floor give their teammates confidence, because with this guy, we're going to have a chance. And I see that out of the Memphis Grizzlies already this year, that, hey, we go out there with Ja, we got a chance every single night. And their play picked up over the course of the year. This guy's outstanding. The biggest reason they are where they are now, they've done a lot of other good things. Some other guys like Brandon Clark have stepped up. Jaren Jackson, Dylan Brooks has stepped up. And I know he won't win it with an 8th-seeded team, but as you sit down to do your ballot for Coach of the Year, I don't know how you do ballots. Anytime I've had to do one as a coach, right, first I just sort of list everybody who should be in consideration, and then I start narrowing it down. Taylor Jenkins has at least got to be on that list of guys you think about. What he's accomplished with this team in a short amount of time. And look, I don't know Taylor Jenkins. I've never talked to him, so this isn't me trying to promote my best friend or something. This guy's been unbelievable. Like, you see how hard they play, how organized they are, the way he's maximized the skills of the guy he's had. He has to at least be on your short list of guys you think about for Coach of the Year.
He is. And I'm in the process now that we know when the ballots are due. I'm in the process of actually doing it, and he is. And I actually, to your point, I was surprised. I think they're 26th in the percentage of their shots that are threes. And I was surprised because of exactly what you said about him trying to import what Milwaukee does. And even like you can see the corner or corners plural are always filled, and often they are filled with a big man. Clark spends a lot of time in the corner and shot the corner three pretty well. Jackson spends a lot of time in the corner. Valanciunas will go there every once in a while, although they've kind of let him go back to what made him a good NBA player from the beginning, which is just beasting people in the post. And that's clearly like he had a clear idea for this is how we're going to structure the court. And there are going to be some growing pains because we're young and we're not a good shooting team. But like he is building a foundation that as the players get better will work very well. And I actually think you mentioned Dylan Brooks. He's a little overstretched right now. Like, I don't know that you really want to have Dylan Brooks averaging like 18 a game and taking a lot of shots, but he is physical as all hell. Sometimes to the Grizzlies' detriment because he loves to foul people, but and I mean this affectionately, he thinks he's better than he is, and he likes to talk about it. And I just think you need guys like that on your team. Like, they're just a rough and tumble team. They're not fun to play. DeAnthony Melton comes off the bench. If people didn't watch the Grizzlies, one of the most fun bench guys in the entire league this year was DeAnthony Melton, a guy that the Suns gave away for no reason, for nothing, along with Josh Jackson, who, by the way, started playing pretty well before the season got suspended. DeAnthony Melton and Tyus Jones, their backup backcourt, is like plus 11 per 100 possessions. And just like, they're a fun, tough team. Now, we should talk about the fact that they did trade Jay Crowder and Solomon Hill, who were a big part of their team, and Andre Iguodala, who was not a big part of their team, for Justice Winslow. And to your point about shooting, this is a team that before the shutdown, because of that trade, was now starting Kyle Anderson, affectionately known as Slow-Mo, at the three, and he can't shoot at all. I mean, he's liable to hit the side of the backboard anytime he takes a three. And Justice Winslow, whose shooting is like, one year he might shoot 40% from three, one year he might shoot 29%. You never know what you're going to get. Both of those guys have been sort of profiled as maybe they should be small ball fours and not threes. So Memphis kind of made themselves a little bigger and a little less shootier maybe, and I'm interested to see particularly what they do with Winslow.
Yeah, me too, because in Winslow's career in the NBA, when we've seen him be the most effective was actually when Eric Spoelstra gave him the ball and made him a point guard in Miami. Right. That's when he was most successful, because off the ball, he creates real spacing problems for your team. He's just not a very good shooter. He's also not a very good finisher. He actually got better shooting the ball, but has never improved as a finisher.
That's right. I forgot that like Justice Winslow missing layups was like you could make it was like a meme.
Yeah, so he was an interesting pickup at best. I think the one just for this year with them that could help, it'll be interesting to me to see how much Taylor Jenkins uses him in Orlando. But Anthony Tolliver could be a nice piece for them on a run this year because when Jaren Jackson's out of the game, Anthony Tolliver could give them another guy who can stretch the floor. He only played 5 games with them before things shut down, but they were playing him 19 minutes a game then, and that's the kind of guy they need. Maybe you get a few more minutes out of Grayson Allen, who can both shoot and pass. But to me, they have a lot of great things. They've got 3 problems that they're going to have to overcome, right? They turn the ball over a lot, which I don't know if you're changing with a young team. I mean, that's just a problem you're going to have. They foul a lot, which you alluded to with Dylan Brooks. Again, a young team, and they don't shoot the ball well. So those are the 3 things. If you don't want to buy the Memphis Grizzlies, if you're selling on them, that's why. To me, but they're a lot of fun to watch. They play the game with great enthusiasm. They play at a very fast pace, one of the fastest paced teams in the league, and they're not going anywhere in the playoffs, but at least the games will be worth tuning into.
Yeah, they're 5th in total passes, 8th in assist rate. So again, that unselfish style that Taylor wants to play is there, and like that starts with Morant.
That's exactly right. So I don't know of a coach that has ever said we want to play selfishly. I just don't know. I mean, every coach comes in, talks to their team. We want to play unselfishly. And so as great a job as Taylor Jenkins has done, I don't really give him the credit for that. I love the system he's created and all of that. Those kind of things come from your players, and particularly, as you just pointed out, from your best player. He's going to set the tone for the way you play. And Ja Morant, even though he's their leading scorer, he's a pass-first point guard. And when that guy's willing to give the ball up, then it's a lot easier for the next guy to give the ball up and the next guy after that, and you create an atmosphere. Taylor Jenkins has certainly sold Ja Morant on that, but Ja Morant came in as a pass-first guy.
Well, it's interesting. It sort of gets you into a philosophical discussion of like, what is selfish, right? Because I did Oklahoma City episode last week on this series, and one of the things that surprised me was they're like 28th or 29th in assist rate, and they have the point god on their team. They have Chris Paul on their team, but Chris Paul's not selfish, but he likes to sort of commandeer possessions and play a slow style. Whereas some like Morant is willing to run and he's willing to get off the ball knowing maybe he'll get it back, maybe he won't. Like it really just the stylistic difference between guys who are both sort of prototypically unselfish in different ways, but it manifests itself much differently. And I guess Morant is just more willing to give it up early in possessions and maybe come back and get it back or not. But it all flows from that one guy who has the ability to say, no, I'm going to control the pace this way, or I'm going to let it fly around the court. We're going to ping it around. We're going to play that style. And he loves to play that style.
He does. And again, I think it's a lot easier to get that kind of ball movement and everything when you play faster. The other teams, the defensive team's not locked in and everything else. You come up, that first pass a little bit easier. And Memphis plays fast. Ja's very fast with the ball up and down the floor. He's willing to give it up early. Now, that's something that I think you got to give Taylor Jenkins a lot of credit for, because point guards, by nature, most of them want the ball in their hands. And trying to convince them to give the ball up early when it's not necessarily for a shot, a scoring pass, is not easy to do for those guys. And Ja Morant does it very, very willingly.
If you get this question right, Coach, I think it's going to help your campaign to get verified on Twitter. Who is the highest paid player on the Memphis Grizzlies right now?
Oh, my gosh. I'm going to say, and I'm going to probably be wrong, I'm going to say Jonas Valanciunas.
Gorgie Dieng.
Okay, Gorgie Dieng. Okay, I've got to admit, and this doesn't speak well of me as an NBA analyst, I forgot they had scores.
Well, look, it's been a long time, and I just asked because you brought up Tolliver, and like Tolliver and Jang were playing together before the season ended as their backup front court, playing pretty well. But again, that was because Jackson and Clark were both injured. Another guy that was playing well for them that no one knows about is John Conchar was playing kind of well for them off the bench too and can shoot it. So reasons for optimism about Memphis, at least getting the 8th seed, okay? Number one, I already outlined the advantage they have in terms of the standings. Number two, their schedule is very tough on paper. However, it's backloaded. So their last 3 games are Toronto, Boston, Milwaukee. You got to imagine by that point, at least one, if not all 3 of those teams are locked into where they're going to be seated. And maybe they'll dial it back a little bit. Maybe they won't because they need to get the reps in. I don't know. But I bet they can get one of those games just based on like Giannis isn't playing or something like that. Their first 3 games are Portland, San Antonio, New Orleans. That San Antonio game is a very, very important game because I just feel like they should be able to squeak out 2-6 or 3-5. And at that point, they're in the play-in. And the other thing is, I mentioned the sort of cost of the Justice Winslow trade and the challenge of integrating him, as you mentioned. And it did hurt them down the stretch a little bit. I just feel like between what they were getting from Jackson, playing Melton and Morant together, which has been successful for them this year, a little bit of Conchar here, a little bit of Winslow here, whatever. Like they're going to cobble together enough wing minutes that I think they can sort of stay afloat in terms of what they have in perimeter talent. So I think if they're not in the play-in, I'll be shocked. And I think they should enter the play-in having to win once and not twice. I think they have a good. I'm like cautiously optimistic they finish 8th and just have to win once.
Yeah, I think so. I think 3.5 games is a lot to make up in 8 games. I look at the schedule, though, a little bit differently, I think, because, and it's going to be interesting. One of the most interesting things of this play-in to me is how the teams approach it. But after a 4-month layoff and trying to amp up, I think what we're going to see from the 13 teams who are pretty well locked in, 7 in the West, 6 in the East, is I think they're going to ramp up very slowly. I don't think we're going to see them resting guys as much in those last couple of games, maybe the last game. But I think their guys are going to play limited minutes early on. I think those teams with no home court at stake. In other words, I mean, unless you're really trying to avoid a certain matchup, and I think if you're a true contender, you're going to have to win 3 series anyway, so I don't think you worry about that. You're going to say there's no home court, so why am I going to push my guys hard for a seeding thing? We've been off 4 months. I think those coaches are going to look at this as a 5.5-week training camp to get ready to play in the playoffs in the first round. Whereas the Memphises, the New Orleans, Portland, SAC, those teams are going to be, hey, we got to be up and running on July the 30th or 31st whenever we open to win games and get in. So I think we're going to have what might look like on paper as upsets. I think we're going to have a bunch of those early on because, like, I've got the New Orleans-Utah game, the very first game back. Like, if Zion's back especially, I'm taking New Orleans in that because that's a game they need to win. Quinn Snyder doesn't need to win that game. Like, let's ease into this whole thing. And then I think what the contenders will do, Zach, is as they get closer to that first round of the playoffs, that's when they're going to start amping up the minutes and getting people ready. So I think those first few games are going to be absolutely crucial for Memphis. And I think their schedule's actually tough right there. Like, if I were them, I'd want to be playing the Clippers and the Lakers and Denver early on because I think you're going to see their main guys 24 minutes, something like that, as they ease into it. I would guess that they're taking it a little slower in practices and stuff right now. I don't know that for sure. That's just my guess.
Well, I don't know how I feel about you coming on this podcast and using your coaching expertise and acumen to undermine my point, Coach. You know, it's not very polite. No, you're probably right, and my point was probably stupid. In that case, watch out for the Pelicans because their first 2 games are Utah Clippers, and then the rest of their schedule is teams that are under 500. So if Zion returns in time, by that logic, which I actually kind of agree with now that you've said it, they have a real chance to go like 7-1 or 6-2 if they can pick up where they left off.
Yeah, and I think here's the point is that I think the bigger problem, if I'm a Memphis fan and I'm thinking that Memphis is being treated unfairly in this whole thing, to me, it wouldn't be the schedule or anything else because you only got to play 8 games. You're up 3.5 games. You had a tough schedule coming up had you resumed. I would feel good about that. The part that I wouldn't like if I were a Memphis fan is that we're probably going to have to play in a play-in. We're probably not going to be able to finish up more than 4 games in a
play-in. No, that's not happening. That's not happening.
So I'm going to have to go out and win another game. I could be done 2 games into the playoffs, not make it into the final 8. And that's where I'd feel a little bit cheated, I guess. And I'm not against what the NBA is doing in this because I think both economically and for the on-court product, they needed these 8 games leading in. And it wouldn't have been worth doing if all you brought were the 16 playoff teams. It would have been a bunch of exhibitions that meant nothing. So I thought they made the best decision they could here. But if I were a Memphis fan, I'd probably be railing about it.
Yeah, not the time for self-interest. I kind of lost it a couple of months ago talking to the NBA got a lot of credit for everyone came together and have the collective spirit in mind, and I actually think that there was a little more pernicious sort of self-interest behind the scenes. I was talking to a lottery team that I won't name who was like, well, it kind of sucks for us because we were set up to go 1-15 in our last whatever games and really, move up the lottery odds. And now we're frozen. But if we have to come back and play, we might win too many games. Stop. It's a pandemic. Just make the best of it. Put all your stuff aside and make the best of it. The other team we should mention here is Boston, which gets the Grizzlies pick with top 6 protection. So if the Grizzlies make the playoffs, Boston will get the 17th pick or whatever it is. If they miss the playoffs and jump up in the lottery, then the pick rolls over and becomes unprotected next season. I would guess that Boston is rooting for that scenario because an unprotected Grizzlies pick next season, even if they draft another good player in the Western Conference, you then give yourself to be an injury to a Grizzly away from being in pole position. So that's the other thing. Let's talk about the New Orleans Pelicans, the other team at the edge of this discussion, the team that has been chasing Memphis since the return of Zion Williamson. And really, they're 28-36. They're 10th, minus 0.8 points per game, whatever. 15th in offense, which surprised me. I thought they were better than that. And certainly with a certain flying boulder of a human being, they have been better than that. 20th in defense. That did not surprise me. They were a train wreck on defense for most of the season. With Zion, they are 10-9, and with Zion on the court, they are plus 9.5 per 100 possessions. So you're really talking about 2 teams. The Pelicans without Zion and the Pelicans with Zion. The Pelicans with Zion, despite the fact that he was not in good shape and struggled horribly on defense, looked very much like a playoff team, and frankly, one of the most fun teams to watch in the entire league, if not the single most fun team to watch. There are a lot of ways to tackle this, but the first is we need to know when Zion is coming back. We don't quite know that yet. But, boy, this team is really, really interesting. And his presence changed them in obvious ways, right? He's a star. He's already a star. He walks in as a star. You can give him the ball pretty much anywhere on the floor and let him go one-on-one. You can use him in lots of different ways on offense. You can post him. You can even run a little pick and roll with him, which is something we didn't see. He can take it coast to coast and just run people over and tear the backboard down. But more than that, I just felt like something more ephemeral, something more intangible clicked into place for them it just seemed like everybody was now in the appropriate spot in the hierarchy. There was all of a sudden a little bit more playmaking on the floor so that all the playmaking responsibilities were more well distributed. Offensively, they just had a look of a team that was A, having a lot of fun, and B, was starting to settle into a groove in terms of like, we know how we want to play. We know what our strengths are. Defensively, they had a ways to go. Coach, what strikes you about the Zion version of the Pelicans?
Well, Zion in particular, I mean, you hit on all the things that you can do with him, and I think you hit on the intangible part of it. I think just, like we talked with Ja Morant, Zion there's a different level of confidence with the Pelicans team. I mean, I think their players believe that they're a playoff team and even that they can make some noise in the playoffs when they have him and all of their guys. But I think what people missed with the Pelicans is how rapidly this team was improving even before he came back. So they got off to this 6-22 start where they were 19th in the league offensively and 28th defensively. I mean, they were not even really competitive. Okay, I mean,
their transition defense was just,
and it still is
unbelievably bad.
Yeah, terrible. And they give up a lot of points in the paint, and they turn the ball over, and just not much good to watch. Then after that 6-22 start, and before Zion came back, they had a stretch for a month, middle of December to middle of January. They go 11-5 before he comes back. And they were 9th offensively and 12th defensively. And then Zion comes back, and they actually were 11th offensively in those 20 games. I know he missed one of them. And 8th defensively with Zion. And so this team continued to get better. Now, what did Zion bring to them? Okay. How did they get better defensively? That one has really stuck with me because Zion's not very good defensively.
I'm so happy you brought this up because, again, if you look at their on-off numbers, with Zion on the floor, they're giving up 103.5 points for 100 possessions, which is like number 2 in the league, or would be number 2 in the league among teams. With him off the floor, they're giving up, they're just letting people score, basically. And so I did some research into this. I want to hear your answer to the question. Do you believe that what is happening, and do you believe it has anything actually to do with Zion Williamson?
I do think it has a little bit to do with Zion Williamson because I go back to the point I made. I think because the players have a heightened confidence that they are a legitimate playoff team with Zion Williamson, I think that their sense of urgency on the defensive end changed. I don't think it was Zion's defense that helped them. I think Zion's offense and the confidence that came with them helped them defensively. Now, by the numbers, only 2 things really changed that I thought were significant. They didn't send teams to the free throw line as much. And I know for a fact that's something that Jeff Bezdelic, their assistant coach, who does their defense, had been pushing all year. Quit fouling people. And I couldn't figure out when I watched their film on the court, but their 3-point defense got a lot better. They didn't give up as many threes. Teams shot it poorly. That may be luck of the draw as much as anything. They still don't get back, even with, they didn't get back over any stretch of the season. They gave up transition points. They give up a ton of points in the paint. They don't particularly force a lot of turnovers. But they did do a very good job of limiting the 3, and they quit fouling. But where they really changed with Zion was on the offensive end of the floor. So they always played at a fast pace. They were among the leaders, top 4 team in the league, I think, in fast break points all year long. They shoot a lot of threes and make a lot of threes. That didn't change pretty much the entire year, but they had no interior presence. They were, well into the bottom half of the league, points in the paint, well into the bottom half of the league and getting to the free throw line. Now Zion comes, and for the stretch they have him, all of a sudden they're 3rd in the league in points in the paint and 7th in the league in free throw attempts, and they're still shooting a lot of threes and making them. And so everything with them changed because of that. And here's the other stretch, and you know this, Zach, from history. When you're getting to the free throw line more and you're attacking the paint more, which means your shooting percentage is going to go up, just regular shooting percentage, that means your defense can get set, particularly going to the free throw line. And that helps your defense because you're not in transition as much where we know they're terrible.
So, Coach, I'm used to being the one on my podcast who, makes the big statistical reveal and, has done all the research and, no, here's the actual thing that's happening. And I bring you on, and you have already done it. I don't have anything left to say. Let me say this. You just hit it. I think Zion's biggest contribution to their defense has been his offense. And I think it's not just when you score more, when you get to the line more and you score more, you get to set your defense. And they're doing both of those things much more with Zion on the floor. They're also offensive rebounding at an absolutely colossal rate because Zion Williamson apparently can jump 4 times in the span it takes a normal basketball player to jump once, and is some cross between Moses Malone and Dominique Wilkins or something on the offensive glass. In terms of why their defense, I think that's actually the biggest reason why their defense, the 2 biggest reasons their defense is better to me with him on the floor is, number 1, their offense, and number 2, luck. Because if you look at their shot distribution, they're second to worst, next to worst in opponent shots at the basket. You try to prevent opponents from shooting at the basket. The Pelicans do not do that. And they do not do that any better or worse with Zion on the floor. They're still terrible at it. Their shot distribution allowed is the same. The biggest difference is teams are shooting 31% from 3 with Zion on the floor. I find it preposterous that he has actually anything to do with that other than what I just said about their offense. I think they're getting lucky. The free throw thing is very interesting to me because I don't know what's going on there. Their free throw rate doesn't just drop with him on the floor. It drops by a gargantuan amount. They become the Bucks, basically. They become the best non-fouling team in the entire NBA. I don't know why that is. I'd have to look at it a little bit more. But I think his offense is helping their defense more than anything else that he's doing. And his offense is obviously spectacular. You can do anything you want with the guy. I just think, I spent a lot of the early season, some of the early season, I mentioned in the podcast, watching Lonzo Ball and wondering, what exactly is Lonzo Ball in the NBA? It's just he still is not shooting it very well. He's not a traditional half-court point guard by any means. Is he just going to become a sixth man? What is he going to be? And then enter Zion, and he has this immediate, beautiful chemistry with Zion. They play off of each other. They both want to run. All Lonzo wants to do is throw 70-foot passes, and now he has a target to do it. They have a beautiful chemistry in the half court. And more than that, Zion is a playmaker, full stop. In the half court, in the open court, he's another playmaker. And so Lonzo's lift as a playmaker, particularly in the half court, shrinks. And if he's really a 38% three-point shooter, which that's what he's shooting from 3 this season, if that's real, and a lot of that can be on catch and shoots from somebody else, then you have Lonzo as this, he's not really a traditional point guard anymore at all in the half court. He's sort of like a full court player who does a little bit of everything in the half court, rebounds the hell out of it, defends the hell out of it. You have Ingram, who I think if he's your primary playmaker, he's a little overtaxed, but in a role where he's maybe your third playmaker, he's perfect and has a really nice pick and roll chemistry already with Zion, and also likes to push the pace. And it just, everything sort of made sense. And Zion Alonzo as a basketball player just makes more sense with Zion. And it just he went from a guy that, boy, I wonder what the Pelicans are going to do with him in extension talks. What is his future in the league, to this is really interesting now. And it just, the combination of talent just clicked in a way that I'm not sure the Pelicans even expected it to.
Yeah, look, everything you say about all those guys is right. To me, Lonzo Ball, when you're looking at his positives, size, smarts. I think the guy's a very, very smart player, and he's extremely unselfish. He would much rather pass the ball than do anything else on the court. So you've got the start toward being a very effective basketball player, as you mentioned, shooting 38% from three and making like 2.5 threes a game.
He was launching like freaking JJ
Redick
Redick toward the end of the
shot
season.
Like 12 shots. And the thing I will say is one of the things that I thought was a good step forward for Lonzo Ball this year is he had some games where he was like 1 for 10, 1 for 11 from three. And I saw that as a real positive because, you know, in the past, what I had seen from him, if he'd shoot those first three and they didn't go in, he was passing up shots. Now, I think Alvin Gentry had convinced him, like, no. You're going to keep shooting the ball, and if you're open, you shoot it. So I think that they've got a good thing in Lonzo Ball. Obviously, he's only 22. Where his development has got to come is shots off the dribble, both at the rim. Can he find a way to finish? He hasn't really figured that out. And he really can't shoot the jump shot or a float. He doesn't have any of that off the dribble right now. So if he has to put the ball on the floor going to the basket, he's simply looking to pass the ball. You can see it with defensive teams. They really don't commit to him because he doesn't have great explosion going to the basket anyway, and he doesn't want to really shoot the ball in those situations. That would be his place to develop. But, man, at 6'6", with his ability to defend, he passes the ball and he's making the three. You know, I think sometimes we can get too focused on what guys can't do. He's got a nice package of skills. And as you mentioned, they've got other ball handling parts, you know, pieces. He doesn't need to facilitate everything in the half court. And I almost think if everything goes right and you can run your half court offense through Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, and Jrue Holiday with some catch and shoot and movement stuff for JJ Redick in the half court, what's the problem if Lonzo Ball becomes mainly just a standstill shooter?
No problem.
You don't have a problem
because you're going to play 25 possessions a game in transition anyway, which is where his bread and butter is.
Yeah, and again, I think that's what you do as a coach is you look to people's strengths and you put it together. Like, you know, we've been reading about, and I don't want to get too far off topic, but we've been reading about with Philly, you know, Ben Simmons playing more as a traditional four. I sort of think Ben Simmons as the point guard in transition, let's go ahead and outlet to him, or he's such a great rebounder like Lonzo Ball is. Take it off the glass and go ahead and be our point guard in transition. And then in the half court, fine. Then we'll use Ben Simmons as the screener in pick and rolls. And I think there's going to be more and more guys in the league like that who are hybrid type guys that in transition, they're going to play one position, and in the half court, they're going to have a whole nother role. And I think that's where Lonzo Ball fits for these guys.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jrue Holiday, who had another, you know, a slow offensive start, a slow shooting start, but is as good a perimeter defender as there is in the league. And another guy who is, if he's your second or third ball handler, you're living a nice life. And Josh Hart had a really nice season for them, improved his catch-and-go game, rebounds the hell out of it. They can put out a lot of lineups that are big and rangy and offer a lot of possibilities for what they can do on defense. What's really exciting for me about the Pelicans is you look at they're this kind of team, like you look at their shot distribution on offense, they take a lot of threes and they take a lot of shots at the rim. As they get better, where they're losing a lot on offense is turnovers and free throws. They don't get to the line enough and they turn the ball over too much. As they get better and as Zion gains experience, those little fringy areas that are not really fringy areas, just like the non-shooting areas of offense, those will get cleaned up a little bit. And if they can make some more shots, they shoot the three pretty well, but if they can make some more of the other shots, like you don't necessarily see it in the numbers now, but there's something going on there that is structurally healthy and portends well for what this team can be if they keep it together. So don't forget this year, because if they get the 8th seed and they're rolling, that's a series that I don't think the Lakers are super psyched to play. But if they stay healthy and they keep this team together, I would be very, very bullish on the Pelicans next season. Like, give me all the Pelicans stock for next season. Again, assuming Ingram comes back and Zion's healthy and they have a full year to integrate, like there's just a lot of exciting stuff happening under the hood of this team.
There's no question about that. I mean, they got 8 guys on that team who played a lot, who are 25 or younger. And they mix them with some veteran guys who are not only still really good players, Drew Holiday, J.J. Redick, Derek Favors, Etwan Moore, and then, Melly, who comes in from Europe. So they've got a nice mix. I think the key decisions going forward, I don't know if anybody in the league's done a better job than David Griffin. I seriously don't. Okay, getting the number 1 pick. People, he got lucky, he got the number 1 pick. Yeah, but let's look at all the other people he's added to this team. Like, that had nothing to do with luck of the draw. He had one of the top 5 players in the league walk in and tell him he wanted to go. And he's developed it into this roster. And what he's got with this roster is he's got a lot of talent, which gives him a lot of flexibility going forward. And, some tough decisions ahead, because you talked about if they can keep the team together. Well, they never can, because guys get older and they're going to get paid more money. And you're going to have to make the choices. Who are the guys you're going to pay? And obviously Brandon Ingram and Zion are going to be 2 of them. And then who do you keep? Who can we deal? The whole thing to keep cycling it through, but I don't know if there's anybody you'd rather have in charge there based on what he's already done and what he did in Cleveland than David Griffin. And I totally agree with you. I mean, I'm bullish on this team. This team is exciting. They've got a lot of options. You mentioned some of the things they didn't do well, but when Zion came back, they did start getting to the free throw line. And I think people have a misconception about the whole free throw thing. It's not usually the teams who get to the line. It's not usually a team-wide thing. They get to the line, and they got 5 guys, Zach, who get to the line 4 or 5 times a game. It's usually James Harden gets to the free throw line, or when I was in when I was in Orlando, Dwight Howard gets to the free throw line, or it's one guy, and so they've got Zion, so they're going to get some free throws. To me, the areas for them are, they've got to take care of the ball. Their turnovers actually went up in the time they had Zion. They were last in the league.
He's sloppy.
Last 20 games. But he hasn't played much either.
He's a good passer, but when he gets on the move a little bit, he can get inaccurate. And again, as you said, I think the guy's played 19 games. I think that's the number one thing that I think is the low-hanging fruit, where that's obviously going to get cleaner for him.
Right, and the thing I like about it, you're right, and he plays fast. The positive on that side is Zion's not a ball stopper.
No.
If he goes to – everything's quick with him. I would always talk when we were coaching about quick decisions. Shoot it, pass it, or move it. Don't hold it. And that's how Zion plays. I mean, he'll catch it and go. He'll get it in the post and go. He's not a guy, or he'll pass it. He's not going to stay on the ball. The downside is when you're 19 years old playing in the NBA and you are making quick decisions, some of them are going to be faulty when you've only got that, when you've got that few games under your belt. But then the real thing with this team is, because I agree with you, some of their defensive improvement, not all of it, but some of it was luck. They've got to get committed to the defensive end of the floor. At some point, you're going to have to do a better job getting back on defense, and you're going to have to do a better job protecting the paint. I just don't know if you can build a good enough defense if you don't do those 2 things. I think their personnel is good enough defensively. Zion's got a lot to learn, but look, they got Drew Holiday. They got Favors. Lonzo Ball can guard. Josh Hart can guard. They can be better defensively, and the players are going to have to show a much greater sense of urgency at that end of the floor if they're going to get to where we think they can get. And we're both, I think, talking more next year.
Next season.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's get a little crazy. I think there's a universe in which this team can win 50 games next season. And that may be crazy. That may be getting ahead of you're making a squinty face at me. 48? If I just started with a 4, does it seem less crazy?
No, I mean, I'm not even saying that 50 is not possible. The problem is you've got, and you know this, you've got to start looking at the West and say,
I know the West is too good. That's the
who are
problem.
you
The West is too
stealing
good.
those wins from? Are the Lakers going to fall off? Are the Clippers going to fall off? Is Denver going to fall off? Because I think we could make the same point about Dallas. They're certainly on the rise as a team, the number one offense in the history of the league right now. So they're going to get better. So, you think Portland, as they get healthier, is going to come back. So in a vacuum, I could look at New Orleans like you are and say that that's possible, that they win that many. And then when you drill down on it and say, okay, who they taking those wins from, it's hard. It gets hard. Listen, this year, next year, and probably at least the year after, there's going to be good basketball teams in the West who don't get in the playoffs.
Well, I said this last week. As things stand now, and I don't think necessarily we will enter next season as things stand now, but as things stand now, all 15 teams in the West are going to be trying to talk themselves and their season ticket holders into, we can make the playoffs this year. Even Minnesota will say, well, we have D'Angelo Russell now. Phoenix will be like, well, we made the bubble. We're a young team on the upswing. I do think somebody will step into the rebuilding vacuum that leaves. But yeah, 50 is optimistic just because the West is too good. If they were in the East.
And let's talk about the big one in the West. Golden State probably will not be the worst team in the West next year. They might win a few more games than they did.
Okay, all right. 40. The Pelicans could win 45 games next year.
But you're right, and you would agree with me on this. You know how good you have to be to win 45 in the West next year?
Good.
I mean, really good, because Sacramento, Portland, those teams are all good. I mean, to me, the team it's scary for is Memphis.
Well, that's the point I was getting around when I said, if I'm Boston, I want that pick unprotected next season.
Absolutely.
Because there's a downside for Memphis next year that, as optimistic and as happy as this season has been, we see it a lot where a young team overachieves. The expectations are that they'll just continue this linear improvement. And there's a 1 year, back to reality a little bit. I could see that happening with Memphis. I could also see Morant and Jackson being so transcendent as young players that they hold steady. I don't know. Okay, so the point I was saying is I think the Pelicans could win a lot of games next year. 40, let's say 45 to get me off my high horse a little bit. If and only if they, whether it's through coaching or scheme or internal improvement or whatever, if they really decide we want to be a good defensive team. They're not going to be a great defensive team, but they can't be the 20th best defensive team and win 45 games in the West. They could be the 11th best defensive team and probably win 45 games in the West. That's a big if and a big jump that they would have to make. Can I give you my favorite Zion stat, by the way?
Go ahead.
You mentioned their shot selection with Zion on the floor. I will drill down specifically using Cleaning the Glass, the Ben Falk site. With Zion on the floor, 49.9%, so 50% of their shots come at the basket. The league leading team is the Bulls at 40.5%. So with Zion on the floor, half their shots are coming at the basket. More than that, 17% are coming from mid-range, which is lower than the Rockets, a team that has essentially decided we will never, ever take mid-range shots. So with Zion on the floor, again, under the hood, there's something very healthy going on about their offense. They profile as a potential top 5 offense next year if they clean up some of their problems with turnovers and they just shoot it a little better. That number is staggering. 50% of your shots at the rim. Now, some of that is his putbacks and all that, but that's all baked in. The guy's an incredibly exciting player.
Well, there's no question. And I think for him to do what he did in those 19 games after missing as much time as he did, it was nothing short of incredible. I mean, he's playing, 29, 30 minutes a game, and, he's averaging over 23 points at a real high efficiency, and just starting to round into game shape. I think the big question for the rest of this year for what's going to go on in Orlando is, and now he's even away from the team again, what kind of shape's he going to be in now? I mean, I think that is a big question across the league. but certainly for him, it is. But the one thing I think that we can absolutely guarantee about New Orleans, going into late July and August is there's probably nobody in the league that people are more interested in seeing play than the Pelicans. They sort of captured people this year. And, I've had some people say to me, whatever system the NBA was going to come up with the restart was going to make damn sure that the New Orleans Pelicans were in it and got on TV because, other than the real top teams and the, LeBrons of the world and things like that, who people want to see is Zion Williamson. I mean, he's captured fans' attention unlike few rookies we've ever seen.
What's your take on Brandon Ingram as a player? How much better did he get this year? And how good is he? How good is he? And what is his impact on winning?
I think he's really, really good. And I think the improvement, started a year ago in LA, right? We saw it until he had to be shut down with the injury last year. We saw it start to come in that time last year. And then he went out with the shoulder, impingement, whatever it was. But we had seen it. But it's like a lot of players to me, it's all been about his shooting. I mean, he just didn't shoot the ball well before. And so all those other things he could do at his size in terms of getting shots and putting the ball on the floor were sort of obscured because of the way you could guard him. And the end result of the play wasn't always good because the ball didn't go in. Now the guy's shooting 39% from three, making well over 2 a game. Well, it changes your entire game. It changes the way you have to be defended. His combination of size and skill is, I don't mean to put him at this level, but it to me is similar challenge for defenses as Kevin Durant is. Like, he can get to wherever he wants to go on the floor. His ball handling's certainly good enough to do that. And then even if you've defended him well, he can just shoot the ball over the top of you. Now, when you have that and the ability to make threes, I don't know how you guard him. He's a good pick and roll player. He's a guy capable of running your offense through and running pick and rolls with and everything else. I don't think there's a lot of downside there. I think he's got to get better at the defensive end of the floor. I don't think he's made a real jump there. I actually thought he was best when Luke was in L.A. Luke's first year there actually is when I thought Brandon Ingram was at his best defensively. I think it's sort of been strange that as those offenses gotten better, his defense, I'm not going to say it's tailed off, but it's leveled off. But on the offensive end of the floor, I mean, this guy's really, really good. And I think the positive for him is people got to see it before Zion came back. And now the big challenge with the Pelicans really to me at the offense is, and I think they've already answered it well in those 20 games, that the big question is, how do you get both those guys, your two best offensive players, playing at their maximum? How do you build a system that works for both of those guys?
I think it was really smooth to me, surprisingly smooth. Ingram is one of the most important swing players in the NBA in the next 2 or 3 years for me, because I agree with you, he's good. I think he's good to really good. I think he didn't impact winning this season as much as a guy averaging 26 points a game should impact winning. Something from that profile wasn't quite translating. Some of it is defensively, he still has a long way to go. As a passer, I think he's a B minus with a chance to be a B plus, A minus, and the difference between those things is huge. And so I like the Brandon Ingram that averages 21 points a game and dials it up on defense and averages 6 assists a game more than the one who averages 26 and 4.5 or whatever it is a game. I just think he didn't quite impact winning as much as the numbers would suggest, and I think he had a really good year. I thought he deserved to make the All-Star team. He's in consideration for. I'm not really going to put him on my ballot, but some people will put him on the All-NBA team. It's not insane. I wouldn't do it, but it's not insane. But I just do think that there's a more winning version of him that still puts up good numbers that I think Zion will help bring out. And that's part of what makes this team so exciting to me. Two quick questions, roundtable questions, and I'll let you go. Who poses the largest threat to Milwaukee in the East? Or maybe you're not even picking Milwaukee to get out of the East, but if you are, or even if you're not, who poses the largest threat to them?
Well, I think they will win the East. And I'm not going to be real creative here or real surprising. I mean, Toronto and Boston, I'd make that a toss-up. I mean, those teams are both really, really good. Look, I think the sleeper team in the East, myself, and I like all of the top 6 teams, but I think the sleeper team for everybody, right, is Philly. Like, it's so hard for me to figure out who Philly is because at home, they were absolutely dominant, best home record in the league, and crushed people. Even good teams just took them apart. Like, teams weren't competitive against them. They took Milwaukee apart. They took the Clippers apart. Like, they were just great. And then on the road, they were like, the 20th best road team in the league. I mean, so now
I say worse than the Knicks. That's my shorthand for how bad they were on the road. Worse than the Knicks.
And now we're going to play on neutral courts. Who are they? Because they can be so good and then at times not be as good, but they're the sleeper team because their 2 best players, Simmons and Embiid, are both outstanding. I mean, they've got good pieces around them. Josh Richardson, Tobias Harris, Al Horford. Their depth isn't fantastic, but, in the playoffs, if they're in shape and they can play their guys big minutes, they're the sleeper. But I don't know who they're going to be. I'd love to say they're the team that can challenge Milwaukee, but I want to see how they are. I don't know. Are they in between those 2 teams, or are they going to be the home team? I mean, was there struggle playing on the road, or could they only play at home? I don't know.
I have banned myself from talking about Philly on this podcast for the next week because I'm too obsessed with Philly. So I'm just going to leave that alone for the sake of my own mental health. I understand
that. I think a lot of us who watch the league are obsessed with Philly because it was such a strange season for them.
I'm going to contradict my own ban. I'm going to contradict my own ban immediately and just say one thing. The one reason that perhaps I have not been clear enough in my unending obsession with Philly and why I just cannot give up on them no matter what. And I just want to say it clearly. Number 1, if he's engaged and healthy and in shape, Joel Embiid is the single most impactful defensive force in the NBA, and it is not close. Number 2, if he ever decides to get healthy and in shape and engaged for an entire season, Joel Embiid could be the best player in the NBA. I don't think that will ever happen. That's an incredibly high bar with Giannis ascending to where he is. But I think that what that guy can do defensively at his highest level, and if offensively I think the biggest weakness in his game is his passing is just so-so. Like he has to get better at making the simple read of there are 2 guys coming at me. What's the correct pass for me to make? He's just not good enough at that yet. If he just gets good at that, he doesn't have to become Jokic. He doesn't have to become Arvydas Sabonis or whatever. If he just gets good at that, there are universes in which that player for a season is the best player in the NBA. I think that's a minority view. Like if I surveyed 30 GMs, I think, I know that there are some that might agree with that and see that, and probably an easy majority that do not. But my basic reason for optimism with Philly is that Joel Embiid can be that good. End of Philly discussion. I will not talk about Philly for the rest of the week. Second rapid fire question and last one. There's a logjam in the West kind of from 3 to 7. Who's got the best shot among those teams at least pushing one of the LA teams in the second round, if not out and out upsetting them?
Well, now assuming that, health, guys coming off of COVID tests and all of that, I mean, I'll still take Denver. To me, the most, I don't want to say, I think, I'll say underrated teams from where they are. Last year, they were second in the West and nobody bought them. At least not people doing this kind of stuff, right? Nobody bought them. and they're third now and nobody buys them. Like, you'll get talk about Houston, and you'll get talk about Dallas, and, certainly interest in, Memphis and New Orleans. But for some reason, Denver's just a team everybody glosses over, and people have decided for whatever reason that they're just a regular season team, and that as a playoff team they don't work. They don't like Jamal Murray, whatever it is. To me, I mean, I've always sort of gone with the saying that you are who your record says you are, and they beat these other teams. I mean, they're ahead of them. They're more consistent. I like them. I think they're good. I think that they can, give, I think they can give the Clippers a hell of a series in round 2. I'm interested to see them. And I think part of it is I really can't buy on Utah because of the Bogdanovich injury right now. I liked them before. Conley started playing better. We'll see what it looks like with him coming back, but Bogdanovich is out. Houston can beat anybody on any given night. I just don't know if the small ball stuff it's not going to catch people by surprise when they go into the playoffs and play 7 games. I don't think they've got a lot of versatility in their offensive approach. I'm not really buying them. I love Dallas on the offensive end of the floor, and they're okay defensively. I could actually see them being a tough out for somebody, but I'll still take Denver's shown me a little bit more over time, and I'll take them there. And then who did I leave out of that discussion? Obviously.
Oklahoma City.
Oh yeah, you know what? I should have brought them. That team's good. That team's good. I would go Denver as my number 1 choice, and Oklahoma City would be my second choice of that group. I think Oklahoma City is really good. They can play both ends of the floor. They've got a great finishing lineup that they put out there that I really, really like. I think Danilo Gallinari, everybody talks about their guards, and that is the crux of their team, and they're really good. Danilo Gallinari, when healthy, is a really good offensive player, one of the most underrated guys in the league. Billy Donovan's that's another guy that would have to be on your Coach of the Year list on what he's done. I don't like their depth, but that's, less of a problem in the playoffs, at least usually. But yeah, there's another team. I would say Denver number 1, and then Oklahoma City number 2.
Yeah, if this were to be clear, my answer was pre Bogdanovich injury. My answer was Utah. I thought Utah was the best of those teams. Now, I just think I would shrug and take Houston only because the night-to-night upside is so high with them, and the downsides can be a little bit ugly. But I think they have so much pop that they can be a problem for a short series. But I agree with you. Denver is the most slept-on team in the NBA. I don't know if it's because people don't believe Jokic will translate to the playoffs because the wrong team will target him defensively, and Harden has eaten their lunch over and over again with a couple of exceptions, including the game when they trapped him and started sort of a league-wide movement to defend Harden that way. I don't know if it's because their run, quote-unquote, to the second round last year was sort of like they just snuck by a Spurs team that wasn't any good, and they lost at home to Game 7 to a Portland team who was just good, not super threatening or whatever. In a normal year, I would say this is a very, very big year for the Nuggets. A prove it year. But this is not a normal year. Their superstar just got back from Europe having contracted the coronavirus. I don't know what that means. I just wish everybody good health, obviously. So I don't know if this year becomes more of a wash in that sense. But hell, we don't know what next year is going to look like in any regard. And so, I think, the Nuggets, if you get, I think, and another part of it is that Gary Harris just didn't shoot it this year until the very end of the season. And Jamal Murray is just such a wild card. You don't know what you're going to get. And so there's a lot of reasons why Denver gets overlooked. But if you get them over 2 weeks where those two guards play well, they're a dangerous team, and I think they are the most slept on team in the NBA in terms of just how good they are. And Jokic's postseason numbers last year were ridiculous. His endurance, considering the condition he appeared to be in, was ridiculous, and now he's in much better shape. Millsap and Grant and Porter give them some interesting dimensions that just in terms of defense and stylistic flexibility. I wish this had been a normal year because I agree with you that they're not getting talked about enough. I just wish this were a normal year because I would say this is a big year for this core, particularly with Millsap heading into free agency and all that, to sort of prove to me that you're a little better than you were in the playoffs last year. Yeah, no,
I totally agree. And I thought the Grant pickup was, certainly not one of the real ballyhooed ones in the NBA last year, but it ended up being huge for them.
He's good.
Yeah, very, very good. And then I think, the question of where do they go from here, Denver, huge part of that's Michael Porter Jr. We saw stretches this year where the guy looked like he can be really, really good because you're not going to be drafting high anymore. And I think they're getting a little past the period where you can expect like any of their key guys to take a major jump. I mean, they're not old, but they're old enough now. Like I don't foresee Jamal Murray or Jokic like taking another one of those big jumps. Maybe Gary Harris bounces back a little bit, but where they get their big jump to me going forward is, and as Paul Millsap especially starts to decline a little bit, as you would think, is Michael Porter Jr. That's the guy. And it'll be interesting to see how much that, Michael Malone plans to use him, here in Orlando and come playoff time. I think that, here's the thing. There's no easy series in the West, particularly outside of the Lakers. I think the Lakers will get through the first round pretty easily, but everybody else going to play somebody good, somebody really, really good. And so,
and the matchups really matter. The matchups really matter. We saw it with Denver last year. They tanked the end of the regular season to try to avoid Houston. I still don't think they love that matchup despite, playing them a little bit better. The matchups are going to really matter. So we're going to see you. How many games are you doing for Turner? We're going to see you on that very first game. Where are we going to be able to see you?
Yeah, thanks. I've got 8 games in the regular season, Ian Eagle and I, and then I'm working with Spiro Dides on the first round of the playoffs. Obviously, we don't have a schedule yet of which games. And then I'm working with Brian Anderson on the second round of the playoffs, and then we'll turn it over to the stars. That's us bench guys, and watch the bench guys. Everybody, it's just like the coaches. The longer you go, you shorten your rotation a little bit, Zach. And so, I'll get some minutes early on, regular season, first round, second round, and then, it's time for us, guys, as we shorten the rotation. I'll come home here and watch the conference finals and finals on TV.
Well, I'll tell you, Ian Eagle, everybody knows how good Ian Eagle is. And you and Ian together are fantastic. It's been so long that I actually forgot that was a pairing for most of the season. But Brian and Spiro are phenomenal. And you don't realize how good all of these guys are until you either try to do something like that yourself or you listen to a broadcast done by someone without that kind of experience level and expertise. Those dudes are so good at their job, and you in tandem with all of them would be great. So that's great. Well, I'm excited to see you call basketball again. Are you going to the bubble? Are you going to do it from home?
Yeah, it's a little different with the media guys, as you know. Like we go down and stay at a hotel there. We're not on the campus itself.
You're tier 2. You're tier 2.
Yeah, tier 2. So we're going from the hotel over to the broadcast area, but we got a separate entrance, and we're going to sit even separated from the play-by-play guy. It's going to be all plexiglass. So basically sit in the booth, announce a game, and head back to the hotel. I guess they are letting people in our zone go to Disney Springs, which quite honestly doesn't make a lot of sense to me since that's open to the public. And so I'm just going to watch it in the hotel and make sure I'm not spending much time around people who might have been in Disney Springs and out to the public. That one scared me a little on our call, but it'll be interesting to say the least, both on the court and to just watch how this all plays out. The returns from the players so far have been good, but they've only been there 2 weeks tomorrow. And we'll see as time goes on, because what you're asking out of everybody is really, really difficult. But what I have heard from the people in the bubble more than anything, the coaches that I've talked to, is the amount of planning and the attention to detail by Adam Silver and his entire team there at the NBA has been incredible. Like, everything has been thought of. And I've said to people, and I fully believe this, if the NBA can't pull this off and get to the completion, then shut down sports everywhere until this thing is solved. Because if the NBA can't do it with everything they've done here, no one can do it.
Coach, just stay safe. It sounds like you're going to prioritize that. Stay safe, stay healthy. Best to your family. Enjoy Orlando. It's always great talking ball with you. Thanks for your time.
All right, Zach. Thanks.